natural wonders? In Singapore? Yeah, I thought the same too. But stick around as Mother Nature's biggest fans here lift the veil on the raw, wild and unseen side of this island city. With a confession to make, chasing after wild critters has been killing our feet. So, in this episode, we're shifting the spotlight to those that are a little more, shall we say, grounded. With that, let's go meet our first nature fan, whom I heard is quite the fun guy.
Yes, I'm the fun guy, cause I grow fungi.
Kiat's a self-taught mycologist who has been growing fungi for almost a decade. Back in the old days, fungi's idea of fun was growing oyster mushrooms in a toilet.
I used to tape up the toilet with plastic sheets to make a lab. Plastic sheets like this.
Boy, we're glad he has upgraded to the studio, which now houses over 30 different species of fungi, including prized medicinal mushrooms like lingzhi and cordyceps.
This is the first black lingzhi that I grew, and because of that, it has a special place in my heart.
Gorgeous as his blooms look today, Kiat's fungal journey hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows.
It was a real struggle at first. I didn't really have anyone to learn from, so I had to read books and search on the internet to find some information on how to grow mushrooms properly. And after many tries, it occurred to me that this information could not really be translated to the local climate. So someone had to do the dirty work, and that's me. So I had to find out what substrates to use and what species could actually grow here. And fast forward 10 years later, I'm here.
It seems there's one common thread among nature fanatics, that is, struggles rarely beat them down, even if that means having to endure nature's punishingly long wait, something our next guest knows all too well. This is Desmond Lee, and this is also Desmond Lee.
Besides our national flower being an orchid hybrid, Singapore have a very unique way of honouring our VIPs, celebrities and head of states when they visit Singapore. And parks will hold ceremonies to commemorate the orchid naming under their names.
These very important orchids can be found at the National Orchid Garden in the Singapore Botanic Gardens. There's Princess Diana, Amitabh Bachchan, and hello, President and First Lady Biden.
With the guidance from my mentors, we are able to develop new hybrids. And some of the hybrids are named after my daughter, my wife, and my son.
Aww, the VIPs in his life. Standing among these orchids, it's easy to lose yourself in their beauty, but the path to each successful bloom is far from easy peasy.
Orchids are pretty fussy plants. They require special regimes and good environment to grow. From pollination to flowering, an orchid requires about 4 to 5 years to flower.
Holy phalaenopsis!
As for orchid breeding, the selection of good parentage is very important. After pollination, it takes about 4 to 6 months before the seed pod is ripe enough to send to the lab for culture. The germination process to collection of seedling will take around 1 to 1.5 years. After 1.5 years, the nursery collects the seedlings. It will be planted into desired media, and it will take around another 3 years to see the first flowering.
But don't celebrate just yet.
The flowers might not meet your expectation, and your 4 years is gone to the drain.
I don't think I can handle that kind of disappointment.
But I can. The hard work of growing orchids will be paid off when we send our plants to the Singapore Garden Festival for the Orchid Show competition, and our plants get awarded. This is the most fulfilling moment.
These orchids have their Oscars too? Clearly, this country takes its orchids very seriously. Today you can find orchid nurseries like Desmond's across the island. Or if you prefer a rawer touch, join us for some wild orchid and mushroom spotting in just a bit. Beauty and the Beast, the wild orchid and the fungus. Once there was a lonely and hungry orchid seed who couldn't grow without its own nutrients. Until one day a fungus came along. Out of the goodness of its heart, the kind fungus gave the orchid seed some food. The wild orchid sprouted, grew, and finally bloomed. The pair were inseparable. Through the years, the fungus and wild orchid stayed together, and that's how they lived happily ever after. The end. Welcome back. Hope you've got your good shoes on as we're about to go find some mushrooms and orchids in the wild.
So Venus Loop is a very good place to find mushrooms, especially after it rains. Because of COVID, more Singaporeans are actually discovering more of our green spaces and finding more of these amazing mushrooms that we have in Singapore. Oh my god, guys! There's lingzi.
Woohoo! Jackpot!
Many people are surprised to find lingzi in Singapore, but the reality is, being on the equator, we have a lot of mushroom species, including lingzi.
What other interesting ones do we have?
People are actually discovering that we have bioluminescent mushrooms in Singapore.
Wow! We have them here in our city?
Yes! So these are auricularia species. They are a kind of jelly mushrooms. They are edible. That said, one shouldn't pick mushrooms from the wild to make soup.
Whoops! Change your dinner plans then.
This is lichen. It's a composite organism that is made up of algae and fungi. So mushrooms, in a way, can be found on trees. The entire tree is covered by lichen. I think I'm lichen the lichen. When you're looking for mushrooms, you shouldn't just look at the ground because sometimes they grow quite high up, like over there.
Walk around Singapore's parks like Pasir Ris Park or East Coast Park, and it's common to find orchids growing in the trees too. But Desmond tells us that not all of them are truly wild orchids.
MParks is very serious in orchid conservation. They have reintroduced a lot of native orchids back to the park and roadside.
To date, a total of 40 native species have been successfully reintroduced.
If you're wondering where can you find wild orchids, you are still able to find them in our nature reserve.
But even so, you shouldn't be going off trail in search of them. For the protection of these wild orchid species, many of which are vulnerable or critically endangered, their locations are kept undisclosed. So, keep your eyes peeled the next time you're out on a hike. More importantly, make sure you don't end up trampling on what may be the last orchid of its kind. And that wraps up our episode on our local flora and fungi. Hope to catch you again next week in our final episode.